Let's see if it starts. Oh, it should be the time. Welcome everyone to this week in Svelte episode 100, and today with me, Jesus, I don't know, like himself, Richaris, that will do the changelog with us, and then we have a Q&A. We have a bunch of questions for him, and let's see how it goes. I actually built a way to highlight the question like this afternoon. I hope it works. Let's see. Okay, let's start. Since it's been a couple of weeks that we didn't actually get the changelog, we have the first release on March 31, which is also my mother's birthday, by the way, which is support for TS type assertion. Obviously, like TypeScript was already ready in Svelte. But what these change these assertions like these, which are a thing, I don't know if you know about it, but like you could do something like this. And this is valid TypeScript. And it was erroring out for some, initially it was erroring out for Acorn TypeScript. Then we fixed it, but there was some stuff left in the compiler.
This is not an endorsement, by the way. This is deprecated syntax. The TypeScript team themselves would tick you off if you wrote this.
Yeah, but there are some out there that are actually using it, and it was breaking. But yeah, you should not use this. Let's go. Ensure undefined class still applies scoping class if necessary. I can actually remember what this PR is. I think like if you're doing the class directive with undefined, oh yeah, if you were using the class directive with something that was undefined, it was not applying the scoping class, and so it was breaking scoping. But by the way, like if you follow along like generally with this week in Svelte, Svelte changelog actually got a brand new release, and you can see that it looks much more like the Svelte docs with serif font, and it's pretty cool. Like also Antoine contacted me, which is the developer behind Svelte changelog, and he actually made a bunch of optimization on the backend so that it's way faster, and it's not using the GitHub API directly anymore. It's kind of fetching everything on a cron job. Add setters to derived class properties. So last time we saw that we now have writable deriveds, but we were not creating setters inside class properties for derived, and now with this PR we are, even though like this actually caused another bug that I don't know if we fixed already. Silence assignment warning on more function bindings. Okay. So like there were some assignment warning for the functional bindings, and those are now silenced. Make sure CSS is preserved during SSR with bindings. I have no recollection of this PR.
Yeah, that's some super gnarly edge case around bindings in SSR in non-runes mode. like instead of just rendering everything, we sort of try and render it, and then if something has changed, we try and render it again, and then if something's changed, we try and render it again. And there was some scenario in which that would result in CSS getting missed. As for that assignment one, I think that's been superseded. I think we just like ripped that out altogether. It was one of those whack-a-mole things where we would try and detect assignments to state that was owned by a parent component, so that we could say try not to do that because it's bad. But the mechanism that we used was just so what's the word that I'm looking for? Bad. That we just replaced it all altogether.
Okay, let's go to Svelte 5.25.6 on April Fools. We missed the opportunity to do an April Fool release, but we have ignored generic type arguments while creating AST. Okay, which I guess also kind of fixed type generic arguments. Oh yeah, probably. I have some recollection. Yeah. Now use a more compliant TSES3ST type arguments instead of type parameters, and this was creating problems in the compiler because they were not removed. Better scope global with nesting selection. I think like nesting literally created so many bugs because like it's so complex to deal with scoping.
It is, and I want to shout out 7Nick here, who has like the previous thing that you mentioned as well, and this one too, just a string of PRs like attending to these really tiny edge cases with the CSS pruning.
Yeah. Actually,
super helpful and appreciated because, as you say, it's like gnarly stuff.
Oh yeah, it's super. And also, I don't know, like, but I literally hate the CSS AST. Like, it's so, because there's so much nesting, and whenever you need to reach for something, you need to go like children of a children of a children, and I hate it.
Yeah, like you have a rule, and then the rule has a selector list, but a selector list is a list of complex selectors. A complex selector is a collection of relative selectors joined by combinators, and each relative selector can have a number of simple selectors, and it's just like selectors and selectors. You think of a CSS selector as being like this very simple thing, but there's layers to this stuff, man.
Better consider component and its snippet during CSS pruning, which again, also very annoying. Ensure clearing of old values happens independent of root flushes. I'm pretty sure this was done by Dominic.
Yeah, this is a Dominic PR. This relates to the fact that we now preserve the old value. When you change state, we hang on to that value so that if that state is referenced inside an effect teardown function, you get the old state and not the new state inside the teardown, because that's the behavior that you universally want, and it's the behavior that you get in like React and other things. And there's like a real bugbear of signal-based systems that you always get the latest value even when it's not what you want. But when we did it, we added a bug, and this fixes that bug.
Yeah, I think like this was with the key block, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah. Basically, like inside the key block, when it was re-rendering, it was still getting the wrong value. Address untracked writes memory leak. Okay. Yeah, I don't have much. Allow $sign state and $sign derived to be 3 chicken. Oh, I missed this PR. So like if you never use state, it's actually 3 chicken.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure why you would do that, like declare state and then not use it. But in the situation where that was happening, your bundler wouldn't know that the code emitted by the compiler, where we have like $.state and $.derived, like it would discard the let foo equals, but keep the rest of it.
Okay, gotcha.
But now we've marked it as tree checkable.
Yeah, and this is actually the oh yeah, I remember the bug about this. And this is actually the rework of the ownership validation that Simon did to
Yeah, Simon's been pushing for this change for so long.
I
And
mean,
every time I was like, do we have to, like, I really like this feature. Like it lets you do whatever it is you need to do to ship your app, but it will kind of try to steer you away from writing spaghetti code by mutating state in places that it wasn't created, which is, you know, the root of so many bugs. But there were so many false positives with the warnings.
But I mean, because there's just so many ways to like update the the state in different ways.
Yeah, and it had performance overhead too, because we would need to like each piece of state had an owner.
Yeah.
And when you created objects, like that ownership would need to be propagated to individual properties. And then if you sent it between components, we would need to widen ownership by walking over. It was just like very expensive, very convoluted.
And I think
we replaced it with a much simpler mechanism.
Which also like still helps you with catch the basic thing, but also
it not only does it do that, but it also gives you more, because it's driven by what the compiler can see. We can also inject information about where the offending mutation is taking place. So it's actually a lot easier to resolve now than it was before.
And I think this was also like the ownership thing was also pretty weird with classes, because like obviously like you cannot add the owner to the class. Like we have a way to do it, but then like we were not adding it to the like property of a class, for example. So yeah. Set derived as clean if they are assigned to. This was after the writable derived. Basically, if you were synchronously assigning a derived before actually, like since derived by default it's dirty, I guess. Yeah, it was like rerunning and re-executing the derived.
This was your fix, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, actually, like it is my fix, but it's actually like I did a not very good job, and like Dominic actually had a better idea of just executing the derived when you set it. So
teamwork. Yeah, it's a smart fix.
Yeah. Handle iteration mismatches in a wait block. Yeah, I saw this. This was actually a bug that was opened on SvelteKit, right? And there was basically if the await block actually changed between the server and the client, you will get.
It's the case where you have a promise on the server, or typically a non-promise on the server, and then a promise in the client. So on the server you render the then clause, and then on the client it's supposed to be the pending clause, but that's a mismatch, and it would throw an error when you try to hydrate.
Which by the way is also very useful in SvelteKit, because like I do that all the time to like when I need to stream something. Generally I guard it with like on my load function, if I check if it's a request or a data request, and I just stream if it's a data request, so that I'm sure that the user has JavaScript before streaming it. But yeah, so this was very important. Prevent ownership warning if the fallback of a bindable is used. This was also pretty like with the new ownership system. If you were declaring a state with a bindable fallback, it was still giving you the warning, even though technically that state is actually created inside that component. So it was fixed. Improve internal set versioning mechanic. I think this was also about writable derives, right?
Man, there's a lot of bugs that came out of that. It seemed like such an easy, quick win at the time. Just deleted all of the code that prevented you from writing to derives in the first place. But
I think
like half a dozen.
I think the problem is that obviously like it works, but there were some edge cases that also were not tested because you couldn't do that before. So that's probably,
you're only as good as your test suite. It's a lesson that I keep learning.
Oh gosh, I absolutely love having so many tests in Svelte, because I can tell you how many times I'm just let my development drive by failing tests. Okay, this is failing. Let's see why. Don't transform reassign state in label statement in derived. This was actually for the migration script, because obviously after writable derived, you could rewrite, reassign the label statement as writable derived, but sometimes
Not if it was already declared.
not exactly if it was already declared. And this is actually the latest. So let's see if SvelteKit had some release, which I think it has. Yeah. So we have only call after navigate once on upstart when SSR is disabled. Oh, I actually had this bug in SvelteLab, and I actually like circumvented it, but I couldn't. I should have opened this because basically after navigate was called twice if you were not SSRing. I don't know why, but remove internet class replacement hack that isn't needed anymore. Was so much cool because it was a whole hack, and but this was just removing stuff, right?
This is like the ownership validation. This is code that I'm so happy to see the back of because it's really filthy. But also I kind of grieve it because it was clever. It was stupid but clever.
I remember looking at this, and there is this shameful hack allow us to load runtime server code via Vite while upload HTTP error and redirect. I love.
Yeah, you have this fun problem where like code that is used by the framework and also by the app. Like in one case, it was being loaded directly in Node. In one case, it was coming through Vite. And so even though you're dealing with the same module, like you've got different copies of the same module. And so instance objects wouldn't work. Like really ugly stuff. But for whatever reason, this isn't a problem in the latest Vite. So
yeah, I think they fixed it in Vite. And so it was there, but then it was creating some problem with CSS, I think. Allow handle server error hook to access get request event, which by the way is a very nice QoL improvement.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite new additions.
Yeah,
really like async local storage and the fact that it's universally available. We just got to get it in the browser as well now.
Yeah, I don't know how. Is it like there's any plan for how is it called, the thing where like browsers agree, or okay, this year we will do this? I can't remember.
Interrupt. Yeah, it's not part of interrupt, but there has been some movement on this. So for anyone who doesn't have the context of this, this get request event feature works using a feature called async local storage, which basically allows you to maintain context in between await expressions. So you some work starts here and then you await something and then some work resumes. Like you can retrieve the context here. In the context of SvelteKit, that means that when a request comes in, we capture that context, and then no matter what asynchronous work you have going on during your data loading, you can then call get request event and you can get that same request context. So you don't need to pass your event around with all of the information about what page is going to be requested, all of that junk. That's been in Node for a while. Other runtimes like Bun and Dino and Cloudflare workers and all that stuff, they have adopted it as well. It's become like this de facto thing, but doesn't exist in browsers, and we need it to exist in browsers. There is a TC39 proposal. It's called async context. And it is, if there's one TC39 proposal that I want everyone to root for and upvote, it's this one, because it will make so many things much more easy. And they did recently collect a bunch of feedback from frameworks, and so we and Vue and Solid and React and everyone else like submitted a bunch of feedback being like, we need this, please add this. So maybe it'll happen. The browsers are pushing back a little bit, like Safari in particular thinks it's not something that we need. Stage 2, yeah, we really want to get it to stage 3.
Yeah, I think there is even 2.7 before, right?
Yeah. There's some shenanigans with the TC39 staging process. I don't really understand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a shame. It's like I thought it was very closer, but it's not. Regardless, we might be able to go over other, but since we have a bunch of questions, let's switch to the actual Q&A. Just before a quick announcement, because obviously, everybody has actually heard of it, but it's coming closer, like May 8 and 9, and I can't wait to be in Barcelona. and meet you all.
It'll be the first time that we've hung out in person.
Look at him.
I think.
Yeah. I actually, like last summit, I was very hyped of the stream on YouTube, but I had literally no way to come to. It was in Norway, right? No, in Sweden. Yeah, in Sweden.
Excuse me.
Yeah. And so I'm very hyped to be around a very large Svelte community. Yeah, and also the venue is so freaking cool. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Enough of this. Let me stop sharing my screen because now we can move to the actual Q&A. So let's switch to the question and let's start with a simple question that I'm sure you love because it's what I cannot pass here. Fuck them. Fuck. Okay. Sorry. Let's do this. I will do for highlight. I should be able to still use it. Oh gosh. Okay. So the first question is, what is the biggest differentiator between Svelte and Vue?
Oh God. Are you trying to get me cancelled here?
I mean, it's not my question, but I'm just a reporter. But
the biggest differentiator between Svelte and Vue. There's a few differentiators. I think the fact that our application framework is first party is an interesting one. Svelte has this kind of batteries included philosophy, and Vue does too. Like it has a lot of stuff that's part of Vue. I think we're maybe pushing that further to its logical conclusion. In terms of like syntax and so on, I'll be honest. I know a lot of people think that they're very similar, and this might come across as like a narcissism of small differences thing, but like things like the double curlies in 2025, like I'm just very offended by that. There's the APIs for reactivity. I'm less enamored of. I know that this is a matter of taste, and some people actively prefer things like ref and reactive ref and shallow ref and all of the other stuff. For me, I sort of look at some of the documentation around the gotchas, and I'm like, I'm glad that we don't have any of these issues, at least not in the same way. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of the syntax. Like the way that we've developed the Svelte syntax, and there are rough edges with ours too. Like there's no doubt things that we would like to change and could definitely improve. But to me, it just feels a lot more cohesively designed.
Yeah.
Overall. And I think part of that is that we have a little bit less squeamishness about pissing off our users. Honestly,
yeah.
My main observation about Vue as a whole is that there is an unwillingness to say, actually, you know what, we're just not doing that anymore. And so as a result, there's like just a lot of different ways that you can use Vue, and like I don't know. I feel like we have a slightly stricter idea of where we want to take the framework.
Yeah, I think like Thomas actually said it correctly. Like personally, I feel that Svelte is more opinionated, while Vue is too permissive and become a bit messy. I think it's like the point. I think like we talked about it a lot of time. I think the point is they are keeping API like stuck in the whole like framework, and obviously, like I think they still support the Vue 2 like option API was called. So like they never get rid of stuff because they don't want to miss their reserve and stuff like that. And in general, I also think, and this might change with Vue Vapor, because basically they are moving against a more compiler-based approach. But I also think that another interesting bit in Svelte is that since we are a compiler, like if tomorrow something better than signals come out, we can just switch to that better thing without sacrificing the the syntax.
But very possibly. I think what it all boils down to is that, like the frameworks that I really love, like React and Solid, like even though those aren't the ones that I personally want to use, I really respect how clear and articulate they are about like what their vision is. There is a very specific point of view about like why this thing exists and why it is not like these other things. And some projects I think don't have that quite as clearly articulated. And yeah, I would maybe put you in that category, but please don't cancel me. We're all friends here.
Okay, we have another. This one is very simple. It's a yes and no question. And would you go bouldering with me? And not with me, but with whoever asked the question, which I don't know who it is. Yeah,
I'm always looking for excuses to go bouldering. I have a climbing gym membership that I use like maybe twice a month. So it's like every time I go, it costs me $75.
Okay, next question. This is actually interesting. If the Svelte team had an unlimited budget, what would you build that you think would make a big impact to website and application for the next 10 years?
Ooh. So sometimes I think about this project that I tried doing back in 2018, back when SvelteKit didn't exist yet, and its predecessor Sapper existed, and the project is an Electron app called Sapper Studio, and the idea was that you would have an application that was dedicated to building Svelte apps, and it had like a bunch of features that you can't really do in a general purpose editor. Like I think it was one of the first examples of being able to inspect an element or a component and having that take you to the line in the source code where that was defined, and like fun stuff like that. And I don't think that's like the right approach. I don't think you should build your own app to do this stuff. Everyone has their editor of choice, and a lot of people have like whatever AI assistants they want to use, and you're not going to be able to take that away from people and say, here, use this application. But I do think that like the process by which we create apps is like, maybe it requires a little bit too much, like there's a lot to get started with. Like I would like it to be more possible for more people to build more stuff, and I think we could iterate on some of the tooling that enables that. Part of that is building dev tools around Svelte.
Yeah, I was wondering,
sort of
like,
guide you towards,
I was wondering if we can do something with DevTools which is closer to what you envision, but maybe not the same. But
yeah, that's definitely something that we're actively thinking about a lot at the moment. I don't know. It's a big question, and I think I would need to go away and think about that for some time. And maybe that's the sort of thinking that we should be doing to help guide what our roadmap would look like.
Yeah. Okay. What? I don't know what I copied. Okay. This other one is also interesting. Your thoughts on local first architecture.
I'm not really interested in this space. I feel like it was very hot last year, and it's kind of fizzled out a little bit, probably as people are starting to sort of crash against the reality of local first, not magically meaning that your web app is no longer a distributed system, because it very much is. I haven't spent nearly enough time actually using the technologies that are coming out in this space to have a really informed opinion about them. But I do think that, like, this general idea of doing as much of the computation on the device as possible is obviously like the right way to build low latency, high fidelity experiences, especially when most people have pretty capable devices. And so it's just natural that, like, you need the data on the device too. I would like SvelteKit to be the best way to build local first apps. At the moment, that's probably not the case, but I think it should be. And so yeah, if people have strong opinions about which, okay, Scott,
Scott is
it's
saying
still hot.
it's still hot.
Yeah, Scott built the Svelte integration with Zero, which is perhaps the poster child of this movement, and has nothing but good things to say about it. So yeah, let's all.
I think in general it's a very interesting concept. The only thing that I kind of like, it's a pet peeve of mine, is that like people obviously get blown away when like you can load immediately and it's super fast, but obviously like that only happens after you have the data locally. Like if you have to download a gigantic JSON of your initial data, it will have the same load time. So after a refresh, it's fine, but like it's still not magic. Like it cannot, like all that data cannot be immediately in your browser. Like, there's probably a lot of optimization that like just like preloading on hover and stuff like that can make you feel instant, but it's not instant at the end of the day.
Yeah, but there's so many apps that would really benefit from a local first mindset, even if only in small amounts. I don't know, if you have like a shopping list app, like that data is probably going to be on my device because that's the device that I'm taking to the supermarket. So it, like, I don't want to have to communicate with the server to remind myself that I need to buy avocados. I'm regularly on the New York City subway, and like I do the NYT crossword and the other games like the spelling bee and the Wordle and everything. And it's so annoying to me that I can't just like download the day's games at the beginning of my journey and then do the puzzles while I'm traveling. Instead, like I have to wait until I get to a station, and there's like a brief 10-second window when your phone reconnects to the cell service at the subway station before you move off again. And in that time, I have to make sure that I open the Wordle page and download the Wordle, and then I can maybe do that before the next stop, and then I do the same thing together. Like, fuck off with that. It's so stupid that we have built things that way. And especially when, the MIT Games team honestly should know better, because we all live in New York City and we know what it's like to be on the subway. But that is a thing that if we were just using local first technologies like as a default, even if it's just a caching layer, like those problems kind of vanish to a large extent.
Yeah. And I agree. Like, for example, my to-do list that I've built with plus page of SvelteKit, and it's still deployed with that old version of SvelteKit. It's a PWA that I've built that just stores everything locally. And like, obviously, like there's no reason to have to communicate with a server. So yeah, I agree. I'm just saying that, like, if you also want like the server, like, because I think like the strength of local first is also that like a lot of people are hyped about it because there is the synchronization layer with the server, so that you can actually have like distributed data and also have it very fast locally. Let's switch to, this is very simple too. Not very, very simple, but when will WebSocket support be officially released for SvelteKit? And there's already a PR open. So
there is actually, looking at that PR again has been on my to-do list. I'm very excited for that work. I know it's been like one of the most upvoted things that we've had for God knows how long. And I think it's pretty much ready to go. Like a huge thank you and shout out to Luke Hagar, who has been doing this work, and there's been a lot of other people involved in that PR, but this has been a marathon, but we're close to the end of it.
By the way, like I know I'm like annoying, but I also think that server-sent events are so much underrated, because like you can actually use server-sent event today very easily, and they are even supported by a lot of more like situations. And most of the time, in my opinion, you don't need bi-directional communication. Like it's very difficult that you need, even for a chat app that it's probably the hello world of WebSockets. You actually don't need bi-directional communication, because it's not so fast. Like the communication is not super fast. Like it's just a form submission. You can very much use server-sent event for that. In fact, this overlay, it's actually using server-sent event, because obviously I need to communicate to the OBS overlay that there is a new question, and it's using server-sent event. Okay. This other is also quite easy, and it's Microsoft is porting TypeScript to Go. How will that affect the integration between Svelte and TypeScript? Will it cause difficulties, or is this mostly a net benefit?
Honestly, I don't know. I know everyone's very excited about the TypeScript in Go. For me, I'm just anticipating like a really ugly migration at some point. So for the record, we don't actually use TypeScript at all currently in the Svelte compiler. The approach that we take is a little bit different. We use a plugin for Acorn, which makes it aware of TypeScript syntax, and then once we have that in the compiler, we can just remove that syntax. Similarly, on the playground, TypeScript is now supported. You can have a TS file and you can have TypeScript syntax in there. And we're not running TypeScript on that stuff. We're just stripping out the types and treating it as JavaScript, which, as long as you're only using the erasable syntax, which like candidly you should be, like even I think the TypeScript team at this point are like, erasable syntax is the way, then that just works. But it does mean that we don't get any of the benefits of having a type checker. We can't know as much about your code as we would if we were using TypeScript. So the short answer is, I don't think it has any immediate impact on us, but I think when this Go implementation of TypeScript is available, I think it's quite plausible that we are going to want to look at integrating that into our compiler somehow. So that we, don't need to maintain Acorn TypeScript, because currently that's a fork that we have to look after. And TypeScript doesn't often add new syntax, but occasionally it does. Like we need to maintain that. But also having the advantages of actually being able to understand the types in our application is potentially very useful. So it's not at all unlikely that we're going to do that, and it just remains to be seen how straightforward that integration is. They haven't really issued a lot of details yet about what the API is going to look like how you're going to call that from your TypeScript projects or your JavaScript projects. So TBD is the short answer. As a TypeScript user, very excited for TypeScript in Go. As a Svelte maintainer, a little bit less excited.
And by the way, this will actually be kind of problematic for our language server, because in the language server, it's actually used like calling a JavaScript API for TSC, and that will probably go away. So I don't know, like there is like they say that like probably I don't want to say most of the API that currently is just available, it will not be available. So that would be annoying to deal with.
Yeah.
So we have. It's been mentioned a few times before that Svelte core team had about 50 or so ideas for Svelte 5, reactivity construct before they agreed on rules. What were some of these ideas?
We had a few broad categories of ideas, I would say. One was, could we just get rid of syntax altogether for reactivity? Like in the same way that Svelte 4, you just have a let declaration and it becomes reactive if you read it and write to it. Like maybe we just keep that, but also do this like the same thing for objects and everything else. And here's the key: we also do that outside .svelte files, so everything becomes reactive. And we tried it, like we tried that, and it turned out that it's actually really confusing because there are plenty of times when something should not be treated as reactive state, and that like didn't give you a good opt-out mechanism, or at least not an obvious opt-out mechanism. So we tried it. It became very unclear like how to define a derived value. Like I think at one point we experimented with let for state and const for derived. The thinking being that derives are read only. If we'd done that, then we wouldn't have writable derives now, which actually turns out that they're pretty useful. So there were just like enough weaknesses and flaws in that idea that we had to jettison it, even though I, for one, was like very in favor of it at one point.
Yeah.
We experimented a lot with using the label idea in more places. So the same way that in Svelte 4 you have $: and then a statement that's reactive. We experimented with state : count equals 0, and then effect : console.log count or whatever. That doesn't really work with TypeScript.
Yeah.
And one of the big goals for Svelte 5 was to have universal reactivity. Like you want to be able to have state in shared modules, and you just can't do that in TypeScript. Even if you have like a plugin that like
you cannot
kind of munges the source code, like your editor is just going to be constantly yelling at you. So we eventually had to give up on that idea. Also, actually defining the types of things didn't work. Like the only way that you could define the type of a declaration when you were using a label in place of a letter of var or const was to use type coercion, which is one of those things that like actually 80% of the time that's okay. Like it looks a little weird, but you can express the things that you need to express. But in the remaining 20% of the time, it will lead you down the garden path. And so we had to abandon that idea too. Other things that we talked about, like what if we use $ as a prefix to signal that a variable is state, and maybe we do the same thing for object properties. So like to do $text is like the reactive text property, or maybe to do has a regular text property, but if you reference it as to do $text, then the compiler is like, oh, they're reading, and it like becomes this whole thing.
That would also probably be very problematic for arrays, for example. Like you have to do $0.
So many ideas that we had that just didn't pan out. Other ideas included like just having a signal API in the way that other frameworks do. But we also felt quite strongly that was, number one, a big downgrade in user experience. Like I want to be able to have primitives that are stateful, and I don't want to have to do .value everywhere or .current or whatever it is. Like there are cases where you obviously do need to do that when you're passing things across boundaries, or you have a class or something. Like you need to have a property. But for like day-to-day bits of state in my components, like just feels like so much ceremony that we didn't want. So we abandoned that. And there are also other reasons behind that decision. We want to have the ability to swap out the implementation on a whim, and you can't do that if you've actually exposed the API to people. And other things like not using reactivity at all during server-side rendering. Like you can do that if you haven't presented an API to people. So when we finally hit upon runes, and they solved all of these problems, like they're explicit, they work great with TypeScript, we have control over like where you're able to use these things and so on. And it just like all of the things that were discovered with these other ideas just kind of vanished. Like that's when we latched onto it and fleshed it out. But prior to that point, we had been going in circles for weeks, if not months, trying to figure out what the thing was. It was brutal, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. This is also pretty easy. Will Svelte share official cursor rules?
Sure. I guess. I'm a real old fuddy-duddy when it comes to this stuff. Like my experiences with Cursor have been sufficiently bad that I just haven't invested time into understanding what Cursor rules are and how I would use them. But if someone wants to teach us how to do that, then sure.
Yeah. In general, like we are having a discourse like around Svelte and AI to improve the situation with like LLMs being a bit picky about like new technologies. But yeah, like so something is definitely coming. Okay, we have what are Rich thoughts on SPAs in 2025? The generalization comes up that dashboard non-CEO apps should be an SPA by default. Does he agree? Will SvelteKit have new features that enhance single-page application use, or it's future server focused?
Do I agree? No. Will SvelteKit have new features that enhance SPA use? Yes. So let me break that down. I know that a lot of people have been a little bit frustrated with SvelteKit because we do have this slightly dogmatic stance about server-side rendering. There is a reason for that. Like we ultimately view our responsibility as being towards the web and the end users of the web, and enabling our direct users, you lot, to build the best apps possible is like how we get there. And the data on the relative performance of SSR versus non-SSR apps is just wild. Like SSR apps perform so much better. They get so much better scores on Core Web Vitals and stuff that if we were to say, you know what, just like do whatever, like we don't care, we don't have an opinion, then like a lot of people out of habit or just like not wanting to think about it or whatever would be like, I'm going to do an SPA. And the reality is that the web and its users would suffer if everyone took that mindset. So we really do want to encourage people to use SSR as widely as possible. And it's not just about SEO. It really is also about performance and resilience and accessibility and all of these things. That said, there is obviously a class of apps that does not need server-side rendering. And at this point, people usually talk about like internal admin dashboards and things. Like I would still say, like in a lot of cases, SSR is useful in those contexts too. Like, you know, maybe I'm trying to look at my company's dashboard on like shitty hotel Wi-Fi. Like I still want that to perform well. And so if it's free, like if you can have the server-side rendering without needing to architecture app in a completely different way, then I would say like just go and do it. Like a lot of the time, it's actually not more work to do the SSR if you're using an SSR friendly framework. Like you're just defining things in the same way. Occasionally, that's not the case. Occasionally, it really is much easier to do everything as a client-only SPA with no server-side rendering. And today, there is a slight bit of friction to do that with SvelteKit. You need to disable SSR with export const SSR equals false at your root layout, but you also need to make sure that you're not referencing anything that assumes it's in a browser context inside your pluspage.js or pluslayout.js files. And in future, that part is going to change.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different approaches that we're weighing up, and I'm not entirely sure which one is going to win. One is we use some very crude static analysis to be like, we can see that this plus page.js has an export const SSR equals false without needing to actually import it and run it and potentially crashing the app because it references document or something like that. If we see that, then we don't even try and server render it. It would probably work in 90% of cases. I have reservations about that kind of static analysis because like the minute that you do something that the static analysis didn't anticipate, I don't know, maybe you do const SSR equals false and then export SSR, like something like that. Like, oh, well, we have to reconfigure our static analysis to expect that. Or maybe you're basing it on some variable, or maybe it's commented out somewhere, but it's still like being picked up by, you know, the scanner. Like all of these things start to behave in like just very slightly uncanny valley, awkward ways that you need to understand the workings of the system in order to be able to diagnose that and remedy it. And I for one, get very annoyed if something stops working in a way that is really hard to understand because of a change that seems completely unrelated. So that's one approach. The other approach, and it's slightly less, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, slightly less flexible and slightly more work, but I think it's probably the right thing to do anyway, is you just have a top level config option in your svelte config.js. You just have some option somewhere that says, we're not going to use server-side rendering anywhere in this app whatsoever. Just don't even try. And then we won't even need to do that scanning. We'll just never, ever try and server-side render anything. I don't know which of those we're going to pick. It's not entirely up to me, obviously. If I had my druthers, then we would use the config option. But I know a lot of people are attached to not having to add something else like that and just being able to use the existing approach and making it more obvious. But we'll see.
I guess another. Yeah, sorry.
The point is that we hear you, we get it. We are motivated to fix this somehow, and it'll probably be fairly soon. Just like look out for one of those PRs. There's actually PRs already for the first approach that I outlined. I don't think we have a PR for the second approach yet. But if people have thoughts on those, then come weigh in.
Great. Okay, let's switch to, this is a big one. Rich has talked about how his experience working in newsrooms have shaped the development of Reactive, Svelte, and SvelteKit, in largely due to the fast-paced environment, which meant that performance solutions were needed to an immediate need. How's the Svelte development team identifies those needs now? In other words, what drives the development of Svelte and SvelteKit?
I think we're at a scale now where we get a lot of feedback very rapidly when we're talking about ideas. So you know, if we put a pull request out that is going to make someone's life more difficult, then we find out about it very quickly. So I think like now that the flywheel is spinning, we don't have quite the same process that we once did. But at the same time, like those of us on the Svelte team, we are also building apps. Like I've been doing a lot of work on our own website recently, the svelte.dev website, and internally we've been working on like some apps inside Vercel. And every time we're, I don't know, porting something that was previously written with React in mind, like we learn things about like these real world requirements. We hear directly from Vercel customers as well, who you know, are paying money to the platform and thus have an expectation of things working to a particular standard. And so we make sure that we like try and insert ourselves into those conversations as frequently as possible. And like people yell at us on Blue Sky and Reddit and GitHub, and we pay attention to as much of that fire hose as we possibly can.
Yeah. And by the way, I think this is also like kind of like the answer to this question is also your talk at the last JS Nation, like North Star. It's kind of
Yeah, we have some guiding principles for how we think about certain things. I don't want to give the impression that like because we try and ingest as much feedback from the user base as possible that like we just end up doing like whatever the loudest voices shout most frequently about, because like honestly we don't. We like we're a little bit pig-headed sometimes about like we think that this is the way that things should be done, and we'll like plant a flag and make that case. But like we synthesize all of these things and like try and chart the path that we think makes most sense.
okay. Let's move on to. Do you think there will be any major change to Svelte in the next few versions? Also, what are the plans for further performance and usability? Native portal support would be cool.
The so yes, there is a major change that that we have in mind for Svelte that I've been actively working on since January. I say actively. I've actually been completely sidetracked by other things over the last few weeks. I'm not sure how much to share about it at this point. I mean, I've kind of talked about it obliquely in a few contexts. Basically, we want there to be a really good way of handling asynchrony in Svelte apps, and today there is. Like, you have await blocks, and in SvelteKit you have data loaders, but there's a real gap in like how you coordinate asynchronous work across independent components and all of those things. That like, we want to take the learnings from other frameworks over the last few years and like do it right, honestly, because I don't think any of the frameworks have got it right so far. And we have some ideas that we think are going to be really compelling. And the reason that this to me is a major change is so much other stuff falls out of that. Like, I think we can probably make SvelteKit like more intuitive and leaner once we have these capabilities. I think it's possible that we'd be able to start thinking about like partial hydration and stuff like it unlocks a lot of stuff that that I think is really interesting, and the challenge for us will be to do all of that in a like a sufficiently incremental and like forward facing way that we can do all of this stuff without like making life difficult for people who are using these things today. I'm pretty excited about this work. I will in fact be talking about it at the end of this month at CityJS, and I don't know, probably at Svelte Summit as well, assuming that we can manage to like ship something by then, or at least have an open pull request. That is the biggest thing. We also have this PR for something that we're calling attachments open on the Svelte repo at the moment. It got a little bit abandoned because the conversation and like the bike shedding of the syntax got so overwhelming. There's something like 200 comments on there. I eventually we were just like, I can't do all this. Like, come back to it another time. But really want to get back to that, as I think will lay the foundation for some really interesting new stuff over the next year or so. So that's where we want to focus our efforts. As for further performance enhancements, I think the main thing would be cross-module optimizations. At the moment, the compiler can only see a single file at a time, and so it's able to make decisions about like how to emit code based on what it can see within that file. Like, sometimes, you might have an expression in the template that the compiler can see is never going to change, and so it doesn't need to create an effect for that. It can just like inline that into the template that gets cloned when that component is created, stuff like that. If we were able to know what your props were, then we could do that in a lot more cases. And so that could result in leaner code that ran faster and had lower memory usage and so on. And there's a couple of ways that we could think about doing that. One is leverage type information. as long as you can truly trust the types and guarantee that if something is annotated as a string, then it is always going to be a string, or if it's always this type of object, then it's never going to like be missing one of those properties or something like that. Then maybe we can use that even just within the single module approach. But I think potentially more interesting is being able to do this kind of analysis across different modules by having something happening at the bundler level where, I don't know, maybe you do a first pass and you understand how, if you have this component and it has a prop that maybe is dynamic and maybe is static, but you can see that all of the places where it's being used in your code base, it's only ever a static value. Then like maybe on the second pass, you can compile that component with that knowledge and have a fast wrap as a result. All of this stuff is like a one-day thing. It's not something that we're actively working on, but that is the best answer I can give to that question.
Cool. Okay, this is also pretty interesting. What's your favorite Svelte feature / a feature you wish people use more?
Oh, favorite Svelte feature. I mean, I do get a kick out of things like transitions, just because I'm a simple man and I like things that go whoosh. But I think they get a lot of use already. I don't know. I'm gonna glance at the docs and see what. Okay. I'm gonna tell you what it is. It's the inspect rune. Like this is a really easy way to figure out when things are changing in your application.
Are you talking about inspect or inspect.trace?
So, but both of them. Inspect.trace, like if you want to understand how you got into a particular function, then inspect.trace is your friend. Like just slap that at the top of the function body, and then every time that function executes, you will see like what state changes led that function to be evaluated. But if you're interested in tracking when a particular value changed, then you would use inspect. And if you use inspect value.with, then inside the callback that you pass to with, you can invoke the debugger or anything. And we do something that is a little bit naughty in signal-based systems. Instead of like waiting for the system to kind of settle, if we have one of these inspect with calls, then that gets triggered as soon as the state changes. Like we flush it immediately, which is in some ways a problem because if you have I don't know, an if condition block, you can inspect condition inside that block and it will trigger before the if block is removed, which I don't know, in edge cases that's something that you need to be aware of, but most of the time it means that because it happens directly, you get the actual stack trace. So you can see in the stack trace which event handler resulted in the state change that led to the update that you care about. And these are really cool debugging helpers that I think are probably not used as widely as they could be.
I agree. I actually agree. Okay, let's see. We have any thought on how signals might keep state in sync across devices or client and server? Ideally, a rune as simple as doors and state, but all users see edits and updates.
So I don't think it's possible for Svelte itself to have like the necessary opinions to do that, because like that can mean so many different things depending on your server setup, and you have to deal with asynchrony and you have to deal with like failed requests and all of that stuff. I do think that when we have the primitives to start dealing with asynchrony better inside components, that will want to have APIs for managing client server communication a lot better. And I don't think it's going to be like this idea that like all users see edits or updates. Like you need to you need to have some mechanism for doing that. Like in all likelihood, if you have a horizontally scaled application, then you're going to need to have like a pub sub thing and some server sent events, and like we can't wire that up for you because we don't know anything about the architecture of your application. So we can't do that. But what we can do is provide like common patterns for wiring that up yourself. And I think that's probably what we'll start to see in Svelte Kit once we have the relevant stuff in Svelte over the next few months.
Okay, we have Rich has mentioned on a few occasions that its ultimate goal for Svelte Kit is to become a full-fledged, full-stack framework like Laravel. What is the plan to achieve that? What features can we expect to be implemented as first-part integration?
So I think before we can build it up to become that, we need to break it down. And what I mean by that is Svelte Kit is this very monolithic thing. A lot of stuff is all kind of jury rigged together, for want of a better word. And this has sort of been the direction of the project since day one. Like it began as a thing with its own CLI that had Vite as a dependency. And then eventually we got to the point where we were able to turn it into a plugin for Vite instead. But there's still a lot of stuff happening inside that Vite plugin that feels like it could probably be broken out. Like the way that we scan the file system and turn that into a routing table is like it's very connected to all of the other moving parts inside Svelte Kit. And honestly, the code base is more complex than I would like. There's more magic happening than I would like. And I think once we are able to start like breaking things out into more modular pieces that can be kind of combined in a way that creates what you know today as Svelte Kit, then it'll be clearer how we can start adding more stuff on top of that. Because the last thing that we want to do is make the monolith even more monolithy by throwing extra features at it. And so that I think is the first step.
Cool. Okay. What is the role of Vercel in the development of Svelte Kit? Svelte.
They pay for it. they pay for it, and honestly, that is the bulk of it. In terms of like the influence that Vercel has over the roadmap. When I joined, you know, we had a lot of conversations about like independent governance and so on, and very consistently, everyone that I talked to was like we're not bringing Svelte into Vercel so that we can like fuck it up. Like we're bringing it because like you guys are doing a good thing and we want to support that. And like a part of me was like, is that true? Like am I making a pact with Faust here? But it has been true that the separation in terms of governance has been like very clear from day one. And so at no point has the company turned around and said, you know, we really need to prioritize this feature. At the same time, being part of Vercel gives us access to like number one, like conversations around like what's happening in Next and like what is happening in the web landscape more broadly. Like we're like I think a little bit more clued into some of that stuff, and we also get direct exposure to like some of the companies and customers that are using Vercel. So the short answer is that you know it's this kind of mutually beneficial arrangement. That I mean I don't think Svelte would continue to meaningfully exist if we weren't able to have full-time engineers working on it, and that is directly possible because of Vercel. And in return, like Svelte is like able to adopt new Vercel features on day one, like incremental static regeneration and stuff like that. Like because of that, because we work there, because we have exposure to the roadmap, like candidly, Vercel is the best place to deploy SvelteKit apps and probably will continue to be. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yep. And this is a bit of a like, what's your favorite Svelte library? Like, this is a bit of a trick. You're picking favorites, but
it is. I mean, I have a soft spot for Svelte, just because. I mean, I've used it for like presentations and stuff, and it's always been such a joy to use. But I think I have a particular appreciation for the work that Grisha and the team have done, because I've tried to build similar things in the past, and I know just how difficult it is to get it right. And it's such a beautiful piece of work, and the documentation is really good. The examples are really good. The website is beautiful, and I just love the fact that like you can build like augmented reality stuff like using Svelte components. It's crazy.
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, when Risha came to This Week in Svelte, I was like blown away by like what you can actually build. And the only reason why I never used it is because I literally suck at like 3D and stuff. But that's for another time. Okay, if you didn't build Svelte, what do you think you'd be doing?
So like in historical terms, like alternate universe timeline, whatever, if I hadn't built Svelte, then I would probably have never left the news industry. So I would probably still be a visual journalist. If the question is more about what would I choose to be doing if I wasn't building Svelte, I don't know. I think I would probably be outside tech altogether. I have a long held fantasy of like opening like a bakery or a cookery school or something like that. I would like to go into teaching one day, maybe. I would like to be outdoors and doing things with my hands. Basically anything that didn't involve a laptop, I think.
That's cool. What's your hot take for 2025?
Oh, can I say this? My my hot take is that we still need humans to write software.
I don't think it's a hot take.
And we'll continue to. Well, I mean, look, I saw like Dario Amodei, the Anthropic CEO, said recently that within 12 months, 90% of code will be written by LLMs. And I'm like, man, have you used your product? Like, I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm like the principal Skinner meme, but I just don't see it.
He didn't say that it will be good code.
Right.
He just said that it will be written by AI. But yeah, I agree. And what? Oh, I didn't copy. What your coding workflow look like?
Excuse me. My coding workflow is I open github.com and figure out what the immediate priority is for me to work on, and then I open VS Code, and then I just stay in there until a thing is done. I'm pretty unsophisticated. Like I don't use a lot of tools. I just use VS Code because like it's good enough for me. Yeah. And then I use the integrated terminal there. That's it. Like the rest of it, you can see on GitHub, like pretty much all that I'm doing is
The only problem is light mode.
yeah.
Okay. If you could copy a feature from any other framework instantly, what would it be?
Interesting. So I'm given what I said previously about the work that we're doing on asynchrony. The obvious answer is suspense, right? Because that's the thing that enables the coordination of asynchronous work happening in different places simultaneously. And if I could copy it instantly, it would save me a lot of work that has been honestly very difficult and brain bending to figure out. At the same time, as I said, I don't think other frameworks have nailed the ergonomics around this. So maybe just lifting it wouldn't be the right thing to do. Maybe we actually need to do the hard work ourselves. Are there any other features that I would like to steal instantly? I mean, we talked about like Laravel and stuff before. It would be very cool if we could just wave a magic wand and, hey, now you have real-time persistence in every Svelte app for free. You can deploy it anywhere.
Yeah.
Go nuts. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, well, that'd be cool. Anything you regret adding to Svelte?
Yes, definitely. Most of the stuff that we're deprecating in Svelte 5, like all of the Svelte 4 features, are things that in retrospect, like we probably should have designed it right the first time, although like it doesn't work like that. You have to design it wrong before you know that it's wrong and can design it right. What are those things? So the attachments PR that I mentioned earlier, that will allow us to eventually, and I do stress eventually, like we're not gonna rip this from people's hands straight away. Like transitions and animations and actions and things like that. They currently use this like really bizarre syntax. Have these really awkward limitations on when and how you can use them and how they compose and so on. I like what we've been able to do with those features, but I really don't love the way that they are implemented. And I really wish that we'd figured that out years ago. I don't know. I'll probably think of a whole bunch more things as soon as we end this stream. There's definitely a lot of stuff that like we probably could have done better, but that's how you make progress, right?
Yep. It's been almost 6 months since the official Svelte 5 release. How would you evaluate the community reception and adoption so far? What worked well and where do you see room for improvement?
So the adoption has been good but not great, I would say. There's a website called majors.nullvoxpopuli.com, which shows you which packages are which versions of which packages people are currently using. And I think it's only this week that V5 has overtaken V4. V4 has been really sticky, and I suspect that's in large part because people have dependencies that need Svelte 4. And you know, no one likes updating working software to newer versions. It's a headache. But like, you know, we really do need people to start moving to the new world so that we can like get rid of some of that tech debt and start moving forward on other stuff. So as I say, good but not great. In terms of the reception, Definitely mixed. Like a lot of people who were drawn to Svelte in the first place were drawn to Svelte because like the 60-second introduction is like, what, I just declare a variable and then I reassign it and everything updates. Wow, that's cool. And then all of a sudden now you need to learn this concept of reactive state, and there's a way that you declare that. And so what was like a very, very simple and seamless introduction, I can just like slap $colon everywhere and everything magically works. It is now like there is a little bit more of a learning curve. And so there is a set of users who just think that we're out of our minds and we've completely ballsed it up and they're just not interested anymore. And that is a shame. I'm sorry that the people who used to love Svelte, like in some cases don't anymore, but it was necessary in order to fix some of the problems that you run into when you start using Svelte for more complex. And so like we kind of knew that was going to happen, and we were sort of we've been at peace with it. It still hurts when you see a Reddit thread and people just assume that we're changing stuff for the sake of changing stuff, as opposed to for very specific reasons that people have repeatedly encountered over the years. Like, yes, we do know what we're doing. This is all based on experience and feedback. But it is counterbalanced by the fact that a lot of people who either ran into these things in Svelte 4 and are like, thank God this is no longer an issue in Svelte 5, or had previously rejected Svelte 4 because, like, candidly, they were smart enough to anticipate the problems that people later encountered, now taking a second look and being enthusiastic about what they see. So I don't know. I am conflicted about it, if I'm honest, because one of the main reasons that I work on Svelte and that a lot of us work on Svelte is because like we want Svelte to be this incredibly approachable thing that makes web development inclusive for the largest number of people. And like the reality of that is that you design things in a way that makes sense within that first 60 seconds, and it might not be the thing that is going to get you to your $1 billion startup or whatever it is. And so what? Yeah, I conflicted, but on the whole, like the conversations that we've had with people who are actually using Svelte 5, people who have been part of the community for a long time, like overwhelmingly, the reaction has been a positive one. It's more the dabblers and the people who never progressed beyond like relatively small apps that have been the bulk of the holdouts. Wow, that was a long, rambly answer to that question. What worked well? Where do we see room for improvement? Our documentation definitely needs some improvement. There's a lot of times I'll open the docs and I'll see something that kind of makes me cringe a little bit. Like we're not doing a great job of explaining stuff. We don't have cross links between the reference docs and the tutorials and vice versa. The search on the website could also do a better job of steering you to the thing that you're looking for. And there's like ideas for how to improve on that, but it all just takes time. And then the things that I talked about, async attachments, like I think these will make a lot of things a lot more intuitive for people once we have them. But again, just takes time.
Yeah. Next one is a very quick one. When do you plan to add TypeScript support to REPL? Already.
Yeah. Well, but partially, right? So Elliot added this actually. Svelte, we had an offsite a couple of weeks ago in Monterey, and during that we had a hackathon. And the original impetus was actually to make it easier for V0, which is Svtelte's AI coding tool, to output Svelte files. It previously could do like one Svelte 4 component at a time. And then like it generally wouldn't render because it has like these very specific requirements about how it gets rendered. And so Simon, Elliot, and I each tackled a different part of this. I worked on adding Tailwind support because V0 loves Tailwind, and you can now use Tailwind in the playground. Simon worked on embedding the playground inside the V0 editor.
Cool.
That hasn't shipped yet, but it's working, and it can also it knows how to generate Svelte 5 code and can use multiple components, so it can actually build applications. And Elliot worked on adding TypeScript support because AIs love TypeScript as well.
Yeah.
And so the Tailwind part has shipped and the TypeScript part has shipped, and you can use those in the playground today. All you need to do is have a file with a TS extension, and it will strip out the types, turn it into JavaScript, and then the rest just works. What we do not have is type checking and IntelliSense autocomplete, all of that stuff. For that, I think we would actually need to be running the type checker in the web worker, which is a little bit more complicated. It's something that I definitely want us to do, but it seems hard and I'm scared.
Yeah. I kind of tried to tackle this in Svelte Lab, and it is not easy. Okay. This is a bit of a self-plug because, will the Svelte team help with creating a links integration for Svelte? And the answer is yes. I'm actually working on that full time. Yeah, because we are working on this, at least for the first part, but we are still figuring out the API.
Yeah, it's super challenging stuff. You and I have had a bunch of conversations about how exactly we're going to make this work, and other maintainers too are deeply invested in this whole thing. I'm very bullish on the first half, the bit that you've already implemented, which quick summary, basically instead of using element.innerHTML to create the fragments that get cloned to build out your app, you can now do that with just regular function calls, which allows Svelte to be used in places with some CSP requirements that forbid setting innerHTML. And so that has value in and of itself, but it is also the stepping stone to being able to use things other than document.createElement to create the constituent parts of your app, which is what's necessary for building a links adapter or indeed any non-web renderer.
In fact, I love that Stalky is actually saying this. He was saying, no, you are working on the terminal integration. Because he would love to build terminal apps with Svelte, which is cool.
In theory, we could have a terminal renderer just like we could have a links renderer. The theory and the practice are quite far apart, though. This stuff is complicated.
Yeah, obviously. Also, Rich, I know that you will need to go in 15 minutes. I don't know if you want a bit of a pause between your now and your next meeting. We can add it. There are some other questions, but I don't know if you. This might take the whole 15 minutes, but what do you think the web is missing right now?
Oh, it's missing the web 1.0 ethos. It's missing independent blogs. It's missing Google Reader. It's missing everything that existed prior to the big social media networks becoming the way that people do stuff on the web. I'm really heartened by the success of Blue Sky and the app protocol. I think that there's enough people who care deeply about all of these things and have seen the damage that has been wrought by centralization and corporatization of the web over the last 15 years. that I think we might be able to dig ourselves out of this hole, but I really hope we do, because the web like really feels like it's losing ground to closed proprietary platforms, and that sucks.
Okay, let's move to, I get that there is a core team of maintainers. How do the other contributors fit in? How can I become a contributor? How much of the know-how, future direction is in the head of the core?
So there's I don't know, I guess there's like concentric circles of people who are directly involved in on the core team in like working on a particular feature, and then like we share knowledge with the other people who are in the maintainers channel, which is like a private channel on the Svelte server, on the Svelte Discord server, and then we'll often share things with the ambassadors channel, which is also a private channel on the Discord server. And then once we've had like a bit of an internal conversation there, and we feel like an idea is not too stupid to share, at that point it becomes a GitHub issue or a GitHub discussion, or in some cases like straight to pull request. So by the time something is on GitHub, it's usually been through a little bit of kind of internal review. That said, like we want to do as much of the like the long-term road mapping like in the open as possible. Like we want people to have visibility into where our heads at on stuff, which is why I'm often a little bit unguarded in situations like this, talking about like the async work, for example. Like I want people to know that this is stuff that we're actively thinking about, rather than doing like a big reveal. In terms of like the path to becoming a contributor and eventually a maintainer, like it really starts with pull requests. I think by and large, like basically everyone who is on the maintainer team is someone who has been noticed doing good work in pull requests. And we don't exactly have like a formal process for this. And honestly, there are probably people who we should bear hug a little bit tighter, because like a lot of people do really good PRs all the time. We're always just like kind of flying by the seat of our pants and always forgetting to put process together. But it is basically, people open pull requests, and over time, often what happens is like the first pull request will be, I don't know, changing like a small thing where it's very obvious how the source code results in the product. And then that's the first exposure to the code base, and the next PR is a little bit more ambitious. And then eventually people are starting to pick like quite meaty issues from the issue tracker and working on pull requests around those. And then at a certain point, like someone in the maintainers channel will be like, hey, did you notice this contributor like has just had this string of really incredible PRs? We should ask them if they want to be more involved. And at that point, like just informally, we reach out, and oftentimes people say yes, they would like to be more involved. And it's not like we don't have time commitments or anything like that. It really is just like you get the ability to push directly to the repo, and you hang out in the maintainers channel. So it's not as glamorous as it might sound. It's just like a bunch of friends hanging out on Discord, I think, is the way that I would describe it. But we really want as many people to contribute as possible. And the way to do that is very often like find an issue that matters to you personally. It's often better if it's something that like you're personally affected by or you care about. If there isn't an issue already, then open one, and then like talk about it on the issue. There's a lot of issues. There's like 750 open issues on Svelte at the moment. So, and unfortunately, like we're not always hyperactive in all of those threads, but like talking within the issue thread about whether this is something that deserves a pull request, and if so, like what's the best way to go about it. is often the best way to get started, and then it goes from there. And that doesn't just apply to the Svelte repo; it also applies to the Svelte kit repo and all of the ancillary things like the Svelte kit CLI. If there's something that you would like to see, then the best way to make it happen is to build it.
Yeah. And by the way, like even if like it doesn't need to be a PR, like even just building a reproduction for someone else's issue or opening a PR with a failing test, or like even just answering in an issue that no, this is expected because you like hang around. I see a lot of people just contributing by saying, "Hey, this is not an issue because I know the direction. Like I already seen this issue, this kind of issue, and it's a duplicate and stuff like that."
Yeah, absolutely. There's like a lot of ways to contribute. So I was speaking specifically about like getting stuff into the code base, but there's like contributing to like docs and producing reproductions, all of that stuff is incredibly valuable. And like you say, pull requests that only contain a failing test and nothing else are worth their weight in gold. Open source maintainers love getting failing tests.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is actually the last one, so we can go. What are some best practices and patterns around using classes with roots?
Good question. I often find that if I have a state field on a class, I actually want it to be state.raw rather than state. Just I'm not sure like why exactly that has turned out to be a pattern, but it has. We want things to feel like conventional as far as possible, and so like if you look at the classes that are exposed by Svelte itself, like the media query class or the spring and the tween class from Svelte/Motion, these are classes that have a current property, which is whatever the current value is. But like in the case of spring and tween, they also have a target property, which is reactive. So the convention there is if you have like the main thing that the class is there to provide, make that your current property so that people know to look for that, and then anything else can be separate. So the media query, for example, we debated making that query dot matches, because that kind of makes sense. Like it's true when the query matches whatever the condition you provided was, but it would break that convention. So that I guess is the main thing that I would say. Use private fields liberally. Like keep the API nice and tight. Just expose the things that you want to expose. Very often you will have some state that should really be read only, and for that a common pattern is to have a private piece of state that is exposed by a public getter. That's something that I've used a few times myself. But beyond that, like I think we're still figuring out some of these conventions. There isn't like a huge amount of prior art, so I don't know, build stuff and see what feels good.
Yeah. I also think that another thing is, and this is actually applying in general, like pay attention if something needs to be staged, because very often I find that some piece doesn't actually need to be staged. Like if you are not reading that thing within a template, it doesn't need to be staked. It can just be a private field, and it will stay.
I thought of one more. Don't use effect.root inside your classes. A common pattern that I see is people will use effect.root inside the class constructor, for example, so that the class can be instantiated outside of a component. That to me is a real anti-pattern. Effect.root is something that like it needs to be there. Like you need to be able to do that, but 90% of the times when you're using it, you probably shouldn't be. Like it really is for hyper abstruse edge cases. Instead, we have this API called create subscriber. It's a little bit of a brain bender when you first encounter it, but what that allows you to do is have a property of your class that is reactive when it's being read in effect, but is not reactive when it's not being read in effect. So you can create a class inside a component. You can create it inside or outside a component. You can use it inside or outside a component, inside or outside an effect. You can read things in an event handler. You can read things in the template. Doesn't matter. It will be reactive when it needs to be reactive, and you won't have to have any handling around cleanup or any of that stuff. So yeah, don't use effect roots. This will be easier too once we eventually merge the state on change PR that that Paolo did. Really excited for that one.
Yeah.
I in fact is high on my list of things to review. Maybe today if I have time. Really terrific work on that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean,
it's there were some really hard problems to solve in that. And
speak after you review it, but I appreciate it. Okay, that was it, and it was very fun. And thanks for joining to celebrate the 100th episode of This Week in Svelte.
100.
And actually, like, I think you will now start working. So I mean, I pity you a bit because you basically skipped lunch for us. So thank you. And thank you, everybody. I know that we didn't actually got to read all the questions. Some questions were like not actually questions, and I tried to pick the more interesting one, but we managed to make some good progress. Thank you, Rich, and see you around.
Thank you.
And thank you, bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, I need to stop streaming. Okay. I hate that I can start the